When I was in my former 3 small town parishes, one Sunday I started my homily by asking people to trade their places. It's always first 2, 3 pews are empty. And so I asked them, those who were sitting at the back, to move to the front, and those who sat in the front to move back from the right side to the left and from the left to the right. And there was a revolt. That would have been my first weekend if I had not quickly said I was just kidding. We Catholics, we tend to have our own favorite place in the church. And that tendency is very strong in small town communities. Here it may not be that much in such a large parish, unless you come 30 minutes before the Mass. But it is there in a small town, and people are afraid to take others' place. And that's okay. You can have your favorite place. I always sit on my same seat every time. But the problem is, if you don't show up for Mass, then everybody is going to notice that. And you become the talk of the town. What happened? Where did they go? And that would be the problem. In the Gospel, Jesus goes to a dinner place, and then he saw people fighting for prominent places at the table. And so he uses this opportunity to lecture them, to give them some instructions on how to choose your place, how to be great. So he invites them to pursue greatness his way. That would be humble way, the way of humility. And that's what today we are confronted with in our gospel reading, to reflect on humility. When Pope Francis, he celebrated a Mass a couple of years ago for the staff and members of the Congregation for the Clergy. It's a branch in Roman Curia at the Vatican. So he was celebrating his first Mass for them. And in his reflection, he talked about humility, and he said, to be a follower of Christ, to be a disciple of Christ, one has to be humble. And to be truly humble, we must admit our sins and not just our actions and deeds. If we pride ourselves just because of our service honor and not talk about our sins or weaknesses, then we are going the wrong way. That was, I found, very amazing. Here the Pope talking to some cardinals, bishops, priests, all the staff members there, inviting them to admit their sins and become humble and become true followers of Jesus Christ. It's a very challenging call. And he used this text, today's text. One who exalts himself will be humbled, and one who humbles himself will be exalted. That's one of the most favorite slogans of Jesus. In fact, Luke records it twice in his gospel. One at this parable, and another time when he talks about the Pharisee and the publican going to the temple to pray. So he uses the same quote. And many other times Jesus invites us to be childlike, to show the other cheek, and all part of humility. Humility is it is an indispensable virtue in the life of a Christian, for Christian spirituality. Everything that a follower of Jesus Christ does requires humility, to forgive 70 times 7, to show the other cheek, to carry the cross, to humble ourselves like children, and many other things to put ourselves at the last in the line. So these are all part of Christian spirituality, and it is an indispensable virtue. There is nothing more humbling than to become aware of our weaknesses, of our sins, and admit them. And that is the most humbling way for us. Acknowledging our failures, in which in various ways we have failed God, we have failed our neighbors, our family members, we have failed ourselves. Becoming aware of that and admitting that is the most humbling way for a Christian. And at the same time, it is also one of the more prominent channels of grace, channels of God's love, God's mercy. It's like, just like a recovered addict can minister in a prominent way, in a better way, to an active addict. Just like that, when we feel we are forgiven sinners, we can better approach, better minister to those who are struggling in life. And it's a beautiful grace. And we all need to make use of that grace, make use of that potency, that potential we all have. Once we have felt that we have been forgiven, we are forgiven sinners, and there is a beautiful grace at our disposal that we can use. Look at St. Paul and St. Augustine. St. Augustine's feast we celebrate on the calendar today. Both these saints, they constantly acknowledged their sinfulness, and they also became aware how God continued to forgive them and trust them. And they went and told these stories to their listeners. If God has done that for me and in me, He also can do that for you and in you. It's a beautiful message, and that's why they were able to attract many people, and they remain the greatest saints in our Catholic faith. Maybe we can become better witnesses of God's love when we see ourselves as forgiven sinners, inviting others to come on and to experience the same God's forgiveness. In that way, we become better witnesses of God's love, God's mercy, than just presenting ourselves as holy people trying to save the souls of the sinners. In the Gospel, Jesus also lectured this host about inviting, whom to invite, not relatives, not friends, not wealthy neighbors, but to invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. And in the Gospel of Luke, banquet meals, they are not just ordinary meals. They point to Eucharist. They point to the Mass, the celebration of the Eucharist. And this morning, when we entered to the church through these doors, we entered as honored guests of Jesus. Not because what we have done, not because of our great acts, our performances. No, it's because Jesus is our host, and He deems us worthy as His beloved guest. He knows us, that we are poor, we are not rich in love, we are not rich in mercy and forgiveness. He knows us, we are crippled, we don't always walk in the path of righteousness. He knows us that we are blind sometimes, we prefer darkness than light. He knows us, and that's why He invites us as His honored guest to take part in this beautiful gift of the banquet. So let us feel joyful today. Let us have that profound gratitude, because the fact that we are here as His honored guest, because He loves us, He knows us, and that we are worthy to take part in this wonderful grace. So let us thank Him for this, and let's ask Him to make us His worthy instruments to reach out to one another.